I am so excited for this video that it is. I'm just so excited. So I'm going to be reading 100 Years of Solitude. This vlog and probably a few more to come are going to be dedicated solely to this masterpiece. This is one of the best books I've ever read. I just love it. So many of you guys I've seen on Instagram and in the comments here are going to be reading it along with me too, just to get some like minor details out of the way. There's like no schedule. Please just read it at your own pace. I'm starting a little bit late because things have just been so crazy around here with moving and unpacking. So I finally found it, dug it out of a box, and I have it, and I'm so excited to annotate it and talk about it for hours. Why are you staring back there like there's a ghost? I'm going to be sitting down today to start 100 Years of Solitude. I first read this book in I listened to this book in 2020. I also got a few questions on this like annotation system. There's no system. I'm gonna be redoing this whole thing because the first time that I listened to it, I was just haphazardly like sticking tabs in wherever there was something that I wanted to remember or just have for myself, but the colors do not correspond to absolutely anything. So as I go through it, I'm going to be taking each tab out and then just making a whole new system that I will share. But yeah, I can't believe I'm picking this up. It's like I'm so scared to start it because I just want to love it so much. It'll be the first time for me reading it for myself physically. So yeah, this is the bookmark of choice. This is a gift from one of you guys. Thank you so much. Let's start. I am so sweaty. Really great start to the vlog because our air conditioner is broken. So I'm in the little office cubicle and I'm gonna read at my desk, which I never do because for some reason this is the coolest room in the apartment right now. So without further ado, I'm starting now. I had a fat 2-hour nap, but I'm gonna start now. This copy is thrifted, so it used to belong to someone named Kira. Thank you, Kira, for giving this away. Oh my gosh, I'm too excited. I have the translation by Gregory Rabassa, if anyone is wondering. Okay, here we go. Oh my god, I'm not ready. Okay, this I wanna, oh my god. Okay, I need the tools. Okay, so I have these tabs. Kind of want to use maybe some different ones. I have some clear sticky notes that some of you guys gave me. Thank you so much. I'm going to use those. These are some of my favorite highlighters to use in the book. Okay, so page number 1. What is this? This is when I read it the first time. Magnets. Okay, Emma had some really basic thoughts. I think we've leveled up a little bit. Okay, so I'm just gonna remove the first sticky tabs, and then if I can reuse these, that would be amazing. Oh my god, the first sentence is so good. Many years later, as he faced the firing squad, Colonel Aureliano Buendia was to remember that distant afternoon when his father took him to discover ice. There is a huge theme in 100 Years of Solitude of like this sentence, for example, many years later, is something that is reused and recycled so many times, and it's as if people are just constantly looking back, and it's really hard to, I don't remember how hard it is to establish like a cohesive timeline in here, but things are always like looking back, and we use sentences like many years later, many months later, a long time later. He would look back, he remembered, he thought back, like a bunch of that. At that time, Macondo was a village of 20 adobe houses built on the bank of a river of clear water that ran along a bed of polished stones, which were white and enormous, like prehistoric eggs. The world was so recent that many things lacked names, and in order to indicate them, it was necessary to point. Okay, I want to have one about language and things like lacking names and the correspondence between like an actual object and the name of it, because later on in this book there is like a sickness or a plague that goes around that makes people forget the names of things, which is really cool. So what do I want to use for that? I kind of want to use blue. I also want to track the word solitude throughout the whole book because it appears on almost every single page, and I just think that would be cool. I think I'm going to use yellow for that one. The way that I organize my tabs, like how I choose the color of something, is really how it like looks in my mind, if that makes sense. Like the word solitude to me, S, it kind of has a yellow color. I think of a lot of, I guess when I think of letters, they have colors. I don't know if it's 100% synesthesia, I guess you could call it that, but it's a bit like different than that. Like letters as well have personalities, I think. I don't know why I'm going on about this right now. Anyway, so yellow is going to be for the word solitude. I think I'm going to use purple for quite obvious magical realism events and just stuff that goes on like that. Because if you don't know, 100 Years of Solitude is a wonderful work of magical realism. Okay, so I'm 9 pages in, and it's even better than I remembered. Oh my goodness. It's just so good. Okay, so I did finish the first page. The first page is amazing. So essentially we have this town, Macondo. It's not real, although it is, you know, supposed to be set in Colombia, but Macondo isn't a real place. And we have this family that we're going to follow throughout the whole book, the Buendia family, and their family tree looks like this, but we don't really need to worry about that yet because right now we're just following kind of the patriarch of the family, whose name is Jose Arcadio Buendia, and then we have his 2 sons who aren't really in the picture right now, so don't like worry about them yet. But essentially we have this like place that is very secluded. It's a place of solitude. It has this like air of being very old and ancient and secretive, where things are quite primitive and quiet and there's not a lot going on. Like it's described as having prehistoric eggs as like river rocks, but then on the very first page, the first instance of crossing the boundary and like exploding the world of Macondo already happens. Macondo gets visited by a group of gypsies led by this one man, Melquiades, who brings a whole bunch of things for Jose to discover. The first one is the magnets, and he slowly becomes like obsessed with all of these inventions and discoveries, and he wants to explore everything, and so he basically trades his whole life away for these inventions and really cool things, new discoveries that the gypsies bring into Macondo. So the first thing is the magnet, and then eventually they bring in the magnifying glass, which then he trades everything he has away for, and it's like him becoming obsessed with these things that are changing the world, but which like don't work really in his village, don't work out for him at all. None of the things that he wants to put them to use for, like making money or serving like a military purpose for the government, because he thinks that with the power of the magnifying glass he'll be able to wage solar war on people. None of it works out. It all returns to like this destructive force in the village because it makes him lose his mind, he loses his money, he loses the respect of his family and his people. And then one of the last inventions that the gypsies bring, an alchemist's lab essentially. They set it up in his house and he melts away all his gold. Now I'm on page 10, but it's taken me a long time to read that much just because like I'm enjoying it so much, and like it's just a book that like I feel is so easy to get caught up in. The language is so gorgeous. Anyway, so I'm gonna keep reading a little bit more. Oh my god, it's so... wow. I love this quote. I remember this quote. They're talking about like Macondo and how they founded it, and it wasn't even like a purposeful founding. Like we have Jose Arcadio and his people with wives and children and animals. They crossed the mountains because they were searching for an outlet to the sea, but they never found it, and they just gave up, and they were like, okay, might as well just stay here, and that was Macondo. And then they just never went back because it was easier just to stay. But then it says, to the south lay the swamps, covered with an eternal vegetable scum, and the whole vast universe of the great swamp, which, according to what the gypsy said, had no limits. I just love this passage so much, like this whole thing. I remember reading it and just being like, I was in my room at home in my parents' house during the pandemic, and like this, I knew I knew reading it that it was going to be good, but then I think I got to this passage where Jose and he takes a bunch of men with him and they start to try and make an expedition to make contact with civilization outside of Macondo. And then I like heard the audiobook narrator read this and I was just so spellbound. It's so good. It says, "Then for more than 10 days they did not see the sun again. The ground became soft and damp like volcanic ash, and the vegetation was thicker and thicker, and the cries of the birds and the uproar of the monkeys became more and more remote, and the world became eternally sad. The men on the expedition felt overwhelmed by their most ancient memories in that paradise of dampness and silence, going back to before original sin as their boots sank into pools of steaming oil and their machetes destroyed bloody lilies and golden salamanders. For a week, almost without speaking, they went ahead like sleepwalkers through a universe of grief, lighted only by the tenuous reflection of luminous insects, and their lungs were overwhelmed by a suffocating smell of blood." Like, that has no business being that beautiful. I'm back literally 2 seconds later because it's too beautiful not to share. Like, I can just see all of the vegetation and like I can like see the exact like slant and hue of light that's like coming through the trees. It's like kind of almost golden hour, but not really, like the passage that I just read before, but then they keep going. And before them, surrounded by ferns and palm trees, white and powdery in the silent morning light, was an enormous Spanish galleon. Tilted slightly to the starboard, it had hanging from its intact mast the dirty rags of its sails in the midst of its rigging, which was adorned with orchids. Are you kidding me? Like, how I can just see it. It's just such a beautiful image. And it's one that like is so hard to get out of your mind once you've thought of it. And I can just see it. I can just see it. It's like this hollowed out ship that is like disintegrating and becoming part of the vegetation. Like, nature is just straight up eating it and like hollowing it out and making it bloom with flowers and like decimating it back to nature. Which is really cool because it's kind of like almost like the closer you get to Macondo, the more just things start to kind of disintegrate and wear away, and it's just, oh my god. It's just so beautiful. The hull, covered with an armor of petrified barnacles and soft moss, was firmly fastened into a surface of stones. The whole structure seemed to occupy its own space, one of solitude and oblivion, protected from the vices of time and the habits of the birds. That was also our first mention of the word solitude, so I want to write that down, but it's just, the whole structure seemed to occupy its own space, one of solitude and oblivion, and I just want to cry. I've been in a reading slump for like 3 weeks, and I picked this up, and it's just, wow. Inside, where the expeditionaries explored with careful intent, there was nothing but a thick forest of flowers. Okay, we gotta stay hydrated. My eye is twitching. I am sweating. Yeah. Yesterday we came out, and this morning as well, I came in here and he was just, yeah, there he goes, sitting in the sink, wanting me to turn the water on for him. Okay, hi. It is day 2 of reading 100 Years of Solitude. I'm still on the Spanish galleon part. I've just been thinking about this ship just all night. It's just so beautiful. If you guys are reading it, please let me know what you're thinking. I would love to hear all of your thoughts. It's currently like 3 o'clock. I just finished my iced coffee. I'm ready to go. The air conditioning is still not on, but that's okay. We are surviving. Let's read. Alright, hi. So I made it to page 37. This is taking me a long time to read, but wow. Okay, the amount of condensation coming off of here is concerning. That's how hot it is in here. It's just dripping. I'm having a Michael Bublé. This one is lime. My favorite one is the blackberry flavor. Oh my god. But they were out of blackberry, so I got my next favorite, which is lime. I used to hate carbonated things. I don't like pop. I still can't drink pop or Coke or anything like that. I think it's disgusting, but sparkling water is something I've come to enjoy. Anyway, so I'm 37 pages through. Something I'm doing this time, I keep going to the back of the book, because if I haven't already said, this is my second time reading this book, but I keep going to the back of the book and rereading the last few pages over and over again, because this was a book where the first time I finished it, I just sat there like, okay, crap, now I have to go back and read the whole thing through. And because it's been a couple of years since I've read this, I just want to like refresh my memory on how it ends so I can get the most out of how it begins, if that makes sense, because there is a lot going on in here that I forgot about, and I'm not going to spoil anything until I read it in this vlog, if that makes sense. So I'm going to keep giving you like page number updates. I don't know what even edition is this. It's the Harper Perennial Modern Classics edition, but I will only give you like spoilers at the page that I'm reading at the moment, if that makes sense. I will definitely try my best to explain as well, if you haven't read this book, if you're not reading this book, or if you are reading this book, kind of the family circle, the family tree. It's definitely a family circle, because 100 Years of Solitude, if you don't know, and if you don't know, you're in for a big surprise, is a lot about incest. There is so much incest in this book, but it's kind of exploring that in a way. I love as well these clear sticky tabs. Thank you guys so much. So many of you guys, a few of you guys have actually sent me those, so thank you. But I love writing on those. How I was saying before, how Macondo is surrounded by a swamp. I think that's really, it's just really cool, because obviously a swamp is somewhere that is very stagnant. It's a body of water that doesn't really move. It stays still. It doesn't really have a huge outlet to the sea. It isn't really being renewed by fresh water or by water from a stream or a river or the ocean. Like I said, it's just this big, muddy, gross, scummy body of water that just sits and stagnates and festers, and that is essentially the Buendia family and Macondo, and the fact that Macondo is surrounded on all sides by this vast swamp, and the language describing the swamp is very much kind of the stereotypical language that you would use to describe the ocean, in the way that the ocean is endless, it's boundless, it has no boundaries, it goes on forever, it's eternal. But that is how our narrator is describing the swamp, which is really cool, because famously, like we said before, they can't find the ocean. Like Jose cannot find the ocean on any of his expeditions, and that's where he was trying to get to when he left his hometown with Ursula, his wife. So those are the matriarch and the patriarch of the family we're following, although 100 Years of Solitude does discuss further back and discusses their lineage, but mostly for the purposes of this book, we can just kind of content ourselves with Jose and Ursula as the founding Buendia family couple, even though their lineage is important as well. Another thing that I've kind of highlighted is keeping track of how many times, like I was saying, people say many years later. Obviously the book begins with many years later, and that's something that kind of works in a really cool way to make sure that the book is not linear at all. This book is very much just so circular, and the future will infringe on like the timeline that we're in the present as you're reading the book. So for example, we're going along, we're talking about the Spanish galleon in the flowers, in the middle of flowers, and then it says many years later, Colonel Aureliano Buendia crossed the region again. And so you have like this like at every single second, and it's like the past and the present and the future can't ever get away from bisecting or intersecting with each other, changing each other, being reminded of something. And it's like this continuous cycle that will go on forever. We have Ursula and we have Jose, and they are cousins, which is something that isn't revealed until much later, because you constantly have kind of the history of the family and even events that go on within the family, like describing how they came out of their hometown and searched and went on this massive journey through the mountains to settle Macondo, but they left where they grew up because of their sin, basically, of incest, because they were cousins, they wanted to get married, but it isn't until like things have happened and you already learn about their voyage, that eventually the narrator will go back and tell you like this is the reason that they left, because you don't really get that at the start. It's kind of this revision that keeps going on and we learn things in that way, which is cool. But then we have 2 sons that are born to Ursula and Jose. We have Jose Arcadio, is what he'll be known as, so he has the exact same name as his father. And then we also have Aureliano, who is the younger brother. And then eventually they do have a daughter named Amaranta. So there are the 3 offspring of our first couple, essentially. So Jose Arcadio, who is the eldest son, he is really large, like freakishly large. And at first Ursula had kind of feared that that was a product of their incest, because essentially what happened was that they got married because I guess they just really liked each other and they were like, okay, who cares if we're cousins? But then Ursula's mother really freaked her out and was like, yo, don't sleep with this man, don't have children with him, because if you have children with him, they will be cursed, they will be pigs, they will be iguanas, like you won't have human children. And so she's like, fine, I'm just never gonna sleep with you. But then I think it's like, I don't know if it's a couple of years or months later, Ursula's husband gets really insulted by this man named Prudencio, and in a fit of rage, Jose kills Prudencio, like he throws a spear through this man's neck and kills him. And then he's like, you know what? We're gonna have some freaking children or I'm just gonna keep killing men. And Ursula's like, okay, that's fair. So they have children, and to her relief, they don't come out as, you know, iguanas, they come out as humans. But Jose Arcadio, their firstborn, is freakishly big, freakishly strong, and she says has this weird air about him that he is so built for life that it's a little bit, it's just a little bit disturbing. And then Aureliano is the first human being to be born in Macondo, in the actual town, and he is silent and withdrawn. So it says about their marriage, although their marriage was predicted from the time they had come into the world, when they expressed their desire to be married, their own relatives tried to stop it. They were afraid that those 2 healthy products of 2 races that had interbred over the centuries would suffer the shame of breeding iguanas. The whole reason that Macondo exists is because of guilt. Because what happens after Prudencio dies is that his ghost comes back and haunts both of them, to the point where they're like, okay, we need to leave, because Prudencio, the ghost, is just chilling in their house every single night, crying, having deep nostalgia as he yearned for living people, and he's just going through their house frantically searching for water to like wash his neck wound out with. And so they're like, you know what, we're just gonna pack up and leave. And so that's the whole reason that Macondo exists, because of like guilty conscience. He was so wrapped up in himself, just in like this very self-preoccupied, miserable, sad, lonely, nostalgic existence that we're gonna see plagues the entire Buendia family, just because they're so, like, that's such a good word. He, like the individual, I think that we're talking about Aureliano, he's so wrapped up in himself, but really the whole family is wrapped up in themselves in really disturbing, really violent, and really awful, malignant ways. The part that I'm at now on page 37, what has happened is that Jose Arcadio, the eldest born, has had a child, or he is having a child with this woman named Pilar, who has come to stay with the Buendias to help them with chores around the house, and they're having a child together, but he gets very panicked at this, and so he runs away with the gypsies, who we saw at the start of the book. Melquiades is also dead now, by the way, who is the gypsy we were talking about yesterday, who introduced all of the inventions to the town, but it says that he runs away with the tribe of gypsies because he doesn't want, I guess, to have to take care of this child. I did take all the tabs out because they were annoying me, but this is what it is looking like right now. 37 pages through, so I'm going to go cool off a little bit. I'll probably take a break from reading this, although like all I want to really do is sit down and read it, but I'm gonna go get some work done, unpack a little bit more, and just try to like cool down. I think it's gonna thunderstorm very soon as well. Hi guys, so it is day 3, I think, of reading the best book. It's so good. It's just even better the second time around. It really, really, truly is. So I'm actually on page 50, so literally I think about only 10 pages, which I just sat down to read, but it just takes so long because every page has just something to annotate or talk about. So I did end up adding a few new tabs to the legend, which is looking like a mess now, but I added green. I think I already talked about this. Green is just to keep track of Macondo, so that's not really a new one, but then I added pink, the pink tab, as something to track the past and memories, because a really cool part of the book right now where it talks a lot about the past and also sharing memories with people. And then I did decide to add this little pinky one as predetermination. Determinism is like a huge part of the book, and something no one in the family can really escape from. I mean, Aureliano is clairvoyant, so he sees things in the future. We have Pilar, the woman we were talking about yesterday, who can read the future in the cards. And there's so much more that I don't want to spoil about predetermination and stuff, but that's one. And then I did just add some of these cool gray tabs to keep track of some character stuff that I wanted to save for myself. Okay, so the important things that have happened since I've talked to you is that, like I was saying, Jose Arcadio, who is the oldest son so far in the family, he did have a kid, although he's still missing from Macondo. No one knows where he is still, but the child was born and they decided to name him. 3 guesses. If you said Jose Arcadio, you would be right. He has the exact same name as his father and his grandfather, but for simplicity's sake, so as not to confuse anything, the book says we are just going to call him simply Arcadio. So I don't know if that makes it any better, but now we have three generations living in the family together right now. But shortly after Arcadio is born, she's my favorite character in the book. When I read it the first time, she was my favorite character. Rebecca arrives. So Rebecca is not anyone in the family's daughter. She arrives with this troop of people who come into Macondo because they're like, yo, we have this orphan, Rebecca, and she has like this letter with her. She doesn't actually have a name when she arrives. But it turns out that Ursula's and Jose's like distant second cousin, which means that they are related. Technically, Rebecca is technically related to him. They both died and they've asked Ursula to take care of their daughter. And she comes with her carrying a canvas sack which kept making a clock sound, where she carried her parents' bones. So Rebecca just shows up carrying a bag of bones with her mom and dad inside of it. So Rebecca is related by blood to them, but it's just quickly becoming this very convoluted, incestuous mess, essentially. And they name her Rebecca because, once again, her mother's name is Rebecca. So there's a lot of predetermination, obviously, already in the names because everyone is just named each other's names. It's just so interesting. I think when I read her sections and her parts, Rebecca is a character who is around for a very long time in the book. She lives to be very old, but I don't know why her sections just really intrigued me. I am up to page 50 now, so there will be like spoilers for, 50 pages in or whatever, but Rebecca only liked to eat the damp earth of the courtyard and the cake of whitewash that she picked off the walls with her nails. She eats dirt. I just really like it. So she eats dirt and Ursula and everyone is like, yo, you can't eat dirt. But Rebecca like scrounges up handfuls of dirt, hides them away, and then at night she like stuffs them into her mouth and she just wants to eat dirt. Eventually the family's like, we've had enough of this, and they try a whole bunch of methods and eventually she stops eating dirt. But immediately after, I kind of feel like Rebecca almost brings with her this plague. Like they're very connected because the town of Macondo, basically all of it, gets hit by what they call the insomnia plague. Which is what it sounds like. People cannot fall asleep. And at first everyone is super happy about this because Macondo is booming. There's a lot going on. The town has really changed. We have a bunch of newcomers. There's just a lot to do. And it's a really popping place right now. But what happens is that from the insomnia, you eventually experience a loss of memory. When the sick person became used to his state of vigil, the recollection of his childhood began to be erased from his memory, then the name and notion of things, and finally the identity of people, and even the awareness of his own being, until he sank into a kind of idiocy that had no past. Now, no one is sleeping, everyone is awake, everyone is super nostalgic for dreams, and everyone is slowly losing their minds because they have no memory, no concept of things. This is also one of like my favorite parts in the book, is that because everything starts to slip away from their memory, they just become like these walking, waking shells of themselves that have no concept of anything. Aureliano is like, okay, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna stick like sticky notes onto everything and we're gonna label everything with its name. He marked them with their respective names so that all he had to do was read the inscription in order to identify them. With an inked brush, he marked everything with its name: table, chair, clock, door, wall, bed, pan. But obviously what happens is that little by little, studying the infinite possibilities of a loss of memory, he realized that the day might come when things would be recognized by their inscriptions, but that no one would remember their use. So eventually things just start to drift more and more away, and so now the whole town becomes plastered with signs and pieces of paper labeling everything. Like the cow literally has the word cow on it. Like the concept of things vanishes before I guess the use and knowledge of language does. They eventually just have these pieces of paper with words all over the town, but no one actually knows like what they're for. And it's just so cool because like obviously that's kind of the reverse of that is kind of what happens in everyday life. We have words and objects that really have no correlation between each other, right? We just slap on a word. We call a carpet, but really what is the word carpet? It's not a carpet. There's no direct meaning whatsoever. But now in 100 Years of Solitude, the word has taken the whole place of the object itself, because all they have is the inscription, all they have is the written word, and they have no concept of what the object is. So there is that one-to-one thing that has been breached, even though like it doesn't come to any fruition for them. So I don't know, I just think it's so cool. It's so cool. Thus they went on living in a reality that was slipping away, momentarily captured by words, but which would escape irredeemably when they forgot the values of the written words, and eventually even that is gonna fade. At the beginning of the road into the swamp, they put up a sign that said Macondo, and another larger one on the main street that said God exists. Okay, hi. So I wanted to come on here and give you the last update. I'm still in my pajamas, but oh geez Louise, Kelsifer. I'm in the process of like half getting ready for the day, but I wanted to get this video up later today, actually. So good morning. Hopefully you will see this afternoon on Wednesday. I think what's gonna end up happening is that I want to have a vlog for every 100 pages, because as of right now I got to page 95. So I think that's kind of how maybe it's gonna work out, but there's a lot to talk about. Oh my gosh. So let me give you some finer plot points just to catch you up to speed. So there will be spoilers for 95 pages in if you don't want to be spoiled. So Melquiades, the gypsy who brought all of the inventions and the new items of discovery to Macondo, is alive. He's come back to life. He's discovered the secrets of immortality. Melquiades is such an important character that I'm not gonna get into that right now because that would be spoilers. Now he is kind of installed himself in the alchemical laboratory of the Macondo house with Jose, the patriarch, and Aureliano, who's always hiding down there because Aureliano right now is probably one of the most solitary characters in this book at the moment. What Melquiades is doing is trying to interpret the predictions of Nostradamus. So again, determinism. And it says that one night he thought he found a prediction of the future of Macondo. It was to be a luminous city with great glass houses where there was no trace remaining of the race of the Buendias. Then we have kind of the next step in the expansion or the opening up of Macondo, because we have this man who we can just call him Scote. He is the magistrate from the capital of the province, and he arrives in Macondo and he's like, yo, you all have to paint your doors blue for Independence Day, and everyone's like, no, like we don't have any laws here, why are you here, please go back home, and they kind of try and chase him away. A week later he was back with 6 barefoot and ragged soldiers armed with shotguns. The next finer plot point that is happening is that we have a piano that arrives at the house because they ordered a piano from Italy, and it comes with this Italian guy named Pietro who kind of teaches them how to use the piano. But what ends up happening is that both Amaranta, the daughter of Jose and Ursula, and Rebecca, the adopted daughter, both fall in love with him, and Rebecca goes back to eating dirt. She just gets given the most beautiful lines, I feel like. It says, on rainy afternoons, embroidering with a group of friends on the begonia porch, she would lose the thread of the conversation, and a tear of nostalgia would salt her palate, that's calcifer, when she saw the strips of damp earth and the piles of mud that the earthworms had pushed up in the garden. Those secret tastes, defeated in the past by oranges and rhubarb, broke out into an irrepressible urge when she began to weep. She went back to eating earth. She was getting back her ancestral appetite, the taste of primary minerals, the unbridled satisfaction of what was the original food. It's just so good. It's like she starts eating earth because Pietro goes back to Italy for a time, and she kind of thinks about it in a way that she is eating the dirt somewhere where he's walking on. So it's like this very obsessive habit. The house became full of love, right? That's a sentence, but the love is so twisted. It's not what it's supposed to be. Everyone's relationships become poisoned, and they try to sabotage and poison it for each other, even because, like I said, we had the 2 sisters who fall in love with the same man from Italy, but we also have Aureliano, who feels like he has to also sleep or have a relationship with the woman Pilar, who his brother, right, Jose, the older Jose Arcadio, had the child Arcadio with. Yes, I know. It's ridiculous. Anyway, it says he did not know how he had come there, but he knew what his aim was, because he had carried it hidden since infancy in an inviolable backwater of his heart. Now both the brothers are entangled with the same woman Pilar, and both of the sisters are entangled with Pietro. So kind of the brothers' rivalry at the minute is much more subdued than the 2 sisters right now, because what ends up happening is that eventually there's going to be a marriage between Rebecca and Pietro, who's back from Italy, but Amaranta is so bitter, so much obsessed with Pietro as well, that she says she promised herself that Rebecca would marry only over her dead body. Like, as bad as that sounds, things just get so much worse from there, and Amaranta ends up not having to act on her promise, because what ends up happening is that Jose Arcadio, the eldest son, finally comes back from his tour, and we learn that he has been traveling all around the world. He's been like a sailor, he's been on ships, just everywhere that you can imagine. But he's also become huge. Like, he's just immensely big, like his physical form. I imagine this is where they took the inspiration in, oh man, what's it called? The Disney movie. Is it Disney? The movie that came out with the strong lady. And I didn't like it, but I thought the premise was really cool. Oh, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Pressure like a dip, dip, dip. That'll never stop. Whoa. Movie. So he is that big. But things get worse, right? Because as much as Rebecca was obsessed with Pietro, the minute that she sees Jose Arcadio, who is not technically her brother, but they grew up together and they are technically related as well because they're cousins, she like falls in love with him, becomes obsessed with him, has to have him, completely ditches Pietro, and almost immediately Jose Arcadio and Rebecca are married. Another repetition, the cycle continues of the 2 cousins marrying each other, going to have children. Inescapable, suffocating, hot mess of a family essentially continues. The other extremely upsetting thing that happens is that Moscote, the magistrate, he has I don't know, he has a bunch of daughters, but Aureliano, the brother who has now slept with Pilar, kind of ditched her, moved on from that. He sees this girl who is an absolute child, like she's described as a child. I don't know if it actually says how old she is, but she's one of the daughters of the magistrate, and he's like, I love you. We're gonna get married. So we have these 2 twisted storylines, 2 twisted relationships going on at the same time, and Amaranta gets kind of swept up in the middle because she's like, I'm gonna poison Rebecca, because at that time Rebecca still wants to be with Pietro, but what ends up happening is that she accidentally slips the laudanum into Remedios, who is the little girl, the child bride of Aureliano. She accidentally slips the laudanum into Remedios's coffee or drink, and Remedios drinks it and she dies. To make things even more messy, this book is just wow. Aureliano finds out that Pilar, the woman who he slept with, and that we know that Jose Arcadio slept with, and they had the child, just Arcadio. Now Pilar is going to have another son, I believe, with Aureliano, and Aureliano is like, okay, I'm gonna recognize him, like I'll treat him as my son. So now there's gonna be two sons, both having the same mother, and their fathers will be two different brothers. And then one of the last points that happens is that Jose Arcadio Buendia, the patriarch, loses his mind. The family's like, you're crazy. They tie him up to the chestnut tree and they leave him there for basically the rest of his life. He's just tied outside at all times to this tree, because what ended up happening was that he thought every day was the exact same. Like, he essentially thought time had stopped in Macondo, which like it kind of has for this family. Just doing the same things again and again and again. But he says, I realized that it's still Monday, like yesterday. Look at the sky, look at the walls, look at the begonias. Today is Monday too. And for him, I think for the rest of his life, it's just going to be Monday. And so he kind of gets driven mad by the circularity, the repetitiveness that the family is going through, how things are like they're changing outside of Macondo, and like Macondo is definitely opening itself to different forces from the outside, but the family remains poisonously the same. Is poisonously a word? I don't know, but it sounds cool. Basically, I'm loving this. It is so good. That's what's been going on. A lot to catch you up on, but this book has so many things happening so quickly that it can be really easy to just lose track of it all. And I think sometimes it doesn't really matter because it becomes this hot, tangled mess that you do lose track of it all. You can't help but lose track of it all, but you can also assume that things are just repeating themselves, continuing in the circular fashion. So even if you don't have the exact, intricate, pin down details of a certain relationship or of the family, you can just assume that it's this like basically cloud of hot ash that is just, you know, until one day everything will just get too dense, and we will see what happens when the cloud gets too dense of the family. But it's just so good. I'm going to leave you here because I think this vlog has gotten pretty long. Kelsper is being a crackhead, so I need to go check on him, but I'm just having the time of my life reading this. I am loving every single second of it. This was the first 100 Years of Solitude vlog. I hope you enjoyed. Please let me know how you're liking it, where you are in the book, what your thoughts are, and yeah. So until the next one, I guess we will read the next 100 pages together. So I hope you're having a really good day, and ciao.